The attic's dead. I've never been good at leaving things alone. When I moved into the old duplex on Carver Lane last spring, the attic was the first thing I noticed. A trapdoor in the ceiling, padlocked shut, its edges blackened like something had burned it. The landlord said it was off limits, structural issues, but his voice cracked when he said it. I heard the tapping that night, soft, uneven, like fingernails testing the wood above my bed. Couldn't ignore it. I bought bolt cutters from the hardware store and waited until dusk, when the house felt still. The padlock snapped with a dull clink, and the trapdoor creaked open, dropping a ladder that smelled of rot. My flashlight cut through the dark as I climbed, each rung slick under my palms. The air up there was wrong. Humid, sour, like meat left out too long. I gagged but kept going, driven by that tapping, louder now, calling me. The attic was cramped, its walls sloping sharp, insulation spilling like guts from torn patches. A single bulb hung dead from the ceiling, wires chewed bare. The tapping stopped when I stepped off the ladder, replaced by a low whine, barely audible, threading through the silence. My light caught a trunk in the corner, iron-bound, dented, its lock busted open. I hesitated, the landlord's warning buzzing in my head, but my hands moved anyway, lifting the lid. Inside was a mess of papers, brittle and stained, and a clay jar, its lid sealed with wax. The papers were letters, dated 1942, signed M. Harrow. They rambled about a debt owed to the attic, a pact made by the first tenant, a sacrifice to keep something quiet. Harrow wrote of cutting his palms, dripping blood onto the floorboards, hearing it drink and go silent. The last letter was a scrawl. It's awake. It wants more. I dropped the pages, my skin crawling, and that's when I saw the stains dark, uneven splotches soaking the wood around the trunk. The wine sharpened, slicing through my ears, and the jar rattled, wax cracking. I grabbed it, hands shaking, and pried the lid off. Dust poured out, then something else. Hair, matted and black, spilling over the rim, longer than the jar could hold. I dropped it, the clay shattering, and the hair kept coming, slithering across the floor, wet and gleaming. The tapping started again, frantic, from the walls, the ceiling, everywhere. I backed toward the ladder, but the attic shifted, boards buckling, walls bowing inward. My flashlight dimmed, flickering, and the hair coiled around the trunk, pulling it open wider. A hand reached out, gray, shriveled, nails like claws, gripping the edge. I screamed, swinging the bolt cutters, but they clanged uselessly against the iron. The hand retreated, and the wine turned to words, hissed in my skull. Pay it! I ran for the ladder, but the trapdoor slammed shut below me, the ladder trembling. The bulb sparked to life, dim and red, casting shadows that stretched too far. The hair was everywhere now, tangling my ankles, tugging me back. I kicked free, heart pounding, and pounded on the trapdoor, nails splintering. The walls pulsed, the stains spreading, and that hand clawed out again, followed by an arm, a shoulder. Too thin, too long, joints bending wrong. I threw my weight against the trapdoor, wood cracking, as the thing pulled itself free of the trunk. Its face was a blur, eyes too many, too deep, staring through me. The voice hissed again, yours now. The trapdoor gave, and I fell, crashing onto the hallway floor, pain shooting through my leg. I crawled to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and locked myself in the bathroom, shaking, listening. The tapping followed, slow, deliberate, right above me. I didn't sleep. Dawn came, gray and weak, and I limped outside, calling a friend to pick me up. I told her everything, babbling about hair and hands, and she got me to a motel. I thought distance would help, but that night, I found a strand of that black hair in my shoe, damp and cold. The tapping's back, faint but growing, no matter where I go. Yesterday, I woke with cuts on my palms, shallow, precise, like I'd done it myself. My friend says I was muttering in my sleep, something about a debt. Tonight, the motel mirror showed it. A shadow behind me, tall and bent, its hands twitching. I blinked, and it was gone. But the cuts on my palms are deeper now, weeping red. The tapping's louder, synced with my pulse, and I feel it pulling me back to Carver Lane, back to that attic. I don't want to go, but my dreams are all stares and that voice, promising silence if I pay. I've got the knife beside me, blade glinting, and I'm scared I'll use it. Not on me, but for it. The attic's keeper. I never trusted attics. They're too quiet, too hidden, like the house is holding its breath. But when I inherited my grandmother's old farmhouse last summer, I couldn't avoid it. She died suddenly. Heart attack, they said, and left me the keys with a note. Don't disturb the attic. I should have listened. The first week was fine. I unpacked, fixed leaky pipes, ignored the way the floorboards creaked like footsteps. Then came the scratching. It started at night, faint but persistent, clawing from above my bedroom ceiling. Mice, I thought, or squirrels nesting in the attic. I grabbed a broom and tapped the ceiling, expecting a scurry of tiny feet. The scratching stopped, then answered with a slow, deliberate scrape, like nails dragging across wood. My stomach dropped. I found the attic hatch in the hallway, a square panel with a pull cord, stained dark around the edges. The air chilled as I tugged it down, revealing a rickety ladder unfolding into darkness. I flicked on my flashlight, its beam trembling in my grip, and climbed. The rungs groaned under my weight, and the higher I went, the heavier the silence grew, pressing against my ears like water. The attic was a maze of shadows, slanted beams, cobwebs thick as curtains, a single bare bulb dangling from a frayed cord. I yanked the chain, and the light buzzed to life, casting a sickly yellow glow. The scratching had stopped, but my skin prickled. Something was off. The air tasted wrong, metallic and stale, and the shadows didn't move right. They lingered too long, like they were watching. I spotted it then. A metal box bolted to the floor, its edges rusted red. It wasn't big, maybe 2 feet square, with a padlock hanging open. My grandmother's warning echoed in my head, but curiosity gnawed at me. I knelt, the floorboards creaking, and lifted the lid. Inside was a doll, cloth body, button eyes, its dress stained brown. A key hung around its neck on a leather cord, rusted and cold to the touch. Beneath it, a note in her handwriting. Lock it back. It wakes. I laughed, a shaky sound that died fast. A doll? That's what she'd been scared of? But as I held it, the attic shifted. The bulb flickered, and a low hum started, vibrating through the floor. I dropped the doll, its buttons staring up at me, and slammed the lid shut. The hum stopped, but the silence was worse. Thick, alive, waiting. That night, the scratching turned to knocking. Sharp, insistent raps like someone testing the ceiling. I lay frozen, staring at the dark, telling myself it was the house settling. Then I heard it. A giggle, soft and childlike, seeping through the boards. My blood turned to ice. I bolted upright, grabbed my phone, and called my cousin, Mark. He lived an hour away, but I needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy. He didn't answer. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was a dream. I avoided the attic, kept the radio on loud, focused on packing up Gran's stuff. But when I found her old photo album, my hands shook. There she was, young, smiling, holding that doll. The next page showed the attic, the box open, and a shadow behind her. Too tall, too thin, its edges smudged like wet ink. The caption read, "It chose me." I couldn't stay quiet after that. I climbed back up, key in hand, determined to end this. The attic felt smaller now, the walls closer, the air so cold it burned my lungs. The box was still locked, but the doll sat beside it, upright, its head tilted. I hadn't left it there. My flashlight flickered as I grabbed it, stuffing it back inside. The giggle came again, louder, from behind me. I spun, nothing but beams and dust. The bulb swung, shadows dancing, and I swear one stretched toward me, fingers curling. I jammed the key into the padlock, but it wouldn't turn. The knocking started, above, below, all around, a frantic drumbeat. The floor shuddered, dust raining down, and the doll's head twitched in the box, buttons glinting like wet eyes. I yanked harder, cursing until the key snapped. The knocking stopped. Silence roared in its place, and then I felt it. Breath on my neck, warm and sour. I didn't turn. Couldn't. I ran for the ladder, but it was gone. The hatch hung open, a black square, too far to jump. The bulb burst, plunging me into darkness, and the giggle filled the attic, echoing off the walls. My flashlight died next, leaving me blind. I stumbled back, tripping over the box, and something grabbed my ankle. Small, cold fingers, impossibly strong. I kicked free, screaming, and crawled toward the hatch, heart slamming against my ribs. The walls groaned, a deep, hungry sound, and the shadows moved, slithering, coiling, pressing in. I felt those fingers again, brushing my leg, my arm, my face. The giggle turned to a voice, high and broken. "Stay!" I threw myself at the hatch, dangling over the edge, and dropped. Pain exploded in my knees as I hit the floor below, but I didn't stop. I ran outside, collapsing in the yard, gulping air. The house loomed behind me, attic window dark. I moved in with Mark the next day, left everything behind. But it's not over. Last night, I found the key in my pocket, the broken one. The giggling's back, faint, following me. I see that doll in my dreams, standing in the attic, holding the ladder I can't reach. And this morning, my shoes were dusty, my hands scratched raw. Mark says I was gone for hours last night. I don't remember where. The attic's echo. I've always hated heights, but I hated secrets more. That's why, when I bought the old brownstone on Pine Avenue last winter, the locked attic door gnawed at me. The realtor had shrugged it off. Owner sealed it years ago, probably storage. But the way her eyes darted away stuck with me. I heard the hum that night, faint and pulsing, leaking through the ceiling. It wasn't electrical. It was alive. I found a crowbar in the garage and tackled the door after midnight, when the house felt emptiest. The wood splintered under my swings, revealing a steep staircase spiraling into shadow. My flashlight beam wobbled as I climbed, the air growing thick, damp, like breathing through a wet cloth. Each step echoed too loud, bouncing back distorted, as if something up there mimicked me. The attic stretched wide, its ceiling low and sagging, beams crisscrossing like a ribcage. Dust hung in the air, glinting in the light, and the hum was stronger now, rhythmic, insistent, coming from a gramophone in the center of the room. Its horn was tarnished, its needle poised over a spinning record, but no sound came out, just that hum vibrating in my teeth. Beside it sat a notebook, pages curling, and a jar of cloudy liquid, something floating inside, small, pale, finger-like. I should have left then, but I flipped open the notebook. October 12th, 1923. The first entry read, in tight, slanted script, "The echo must be captured. Speaks truths." The writer, someone named Clara, described rigging the gramophone to record the attic's voice, a sound she'd heard after months of silence. She'd scratched runes into the floorboards, smeared them with blood, believing it would amplify the signal. The last page was a mess. It won't stop. It knows me. I traced the floor with my light. There they were, jagged carvings circling the gramophone, stained dark. The hum shifted, deepening, and the needle twitched, scraping the record. A voice crackled out, mine, saying, "Hello." I hadn't spoken. My throat tightened as the record spun faster, replaying it, "Hello? Hello? Hello?" Each one louder, warped, until it wasn't my voice anymore but something guttural, wet, laughing. I kicked the gramophone over, the needle screeching as it skidded off. The hum stopped, but the silence was worse, heavy, coiled. My flashlight flickered, and the jar glinted. The thing inside moved, curling, uncurling, pressing against the glass. I stumbled back, my boot catching a loose board. It popped up, revealing a hollow space stuffed with photographs. They were old, sepia-toned, showing a woman, Clara, I guessed, standing in this attic smiling. In each shot, the background darkened, shadows pooling behind her, until the last one. Her face blank, eyes black, a shape looming over her shoulder. The attic shuddered. Dust rained down, and the hum roared back, shaking the walls. I bolted for the stairs, but the door at the bottom slammed shut, the crowbar wedged uselessly in the frame. I pounded on it, yelling, as the gramophone whirred to life behind me. My voice again. Stay. I hadn't said it. The floorboards groaned, splitting where the runes glowed faintly, a dull red. Something cold brushed my calf. Fingers, too long, too thin. I spun, light slashing the dark. Nothing, but the shadows bent wrong, folding toward me. I grabbed the crowbar and swung at the door, wood cracking, splinters biting my hands. The hum turned to a scream, not mine, not human, rattling my skull. The jar tipped over, shattering, and that pale thing slithered out, twitching, growing, its edges blurring into the dark. I hit harder, the door giving way as the scream peaked, deafening. I fell through, tumbling down the stairs, landing in a heap, the crowbar clattering beside me. I ran outside, barefoot in the snow, the cold barely registering. The brownstone loomed behind me, attic window black. I crashed at a friend's place, babbling about voices and shadows until she calmed me down. I didn't go back for days, hired movers to grab my stuff, told myself it was over. But last night, I found a record in my jacket pocket. Small, unlabeled, scratched with those runes. I don't own a player, but I hear it anyway. That hum, my voice, whispering, "Come back. Sleep's a nightmare now." I see Clara in the attic, her black eyes watching, that shape behind her reaching for me. The hum follows me, faint in the shower, loud in the dark. Yesterday, my friend found me staring at the wall, humming, my fingers bloody from scratching. I don't remember doing it. Tonight, I woke up outside, halfway to Pine Avenue, the record in my hand. It's still spinning in my head, and the echoes louder, clearer. Finish what she started. I'm fighting it, but my feet itch to climb those stairs again, and I don't know how long I can resist. The Attic Experiment. I've always been drawn to the unknown, the creaking shadows of old houses, the whispers of things left behind. So when I moved into the crumbling Victorian on Elm Street last fall, I wasn't fazed by the realtor's warning about odd noises from the attic. It was a steel 3 stories, stained glass, and a price that screamed desperation. I figured the noises were just rats or the wind clawing at loose shingles. I was wrong. The first night, I heard it, a low, rhythmic thumping from above my bedroom ceiling. Not erratic like an animal, but deliberate like someone pacing with purpose. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed the narrow staircase to the attic door, a warped slab of oak with a rusted latch. The air grew colder with each step, my breath fogging in the beam of light. I told myself it was just the house settling, but my hands shook as I turned the knob. The attic smelled of mildew and something sour, like spoiled milk. Dust swirled in the flashlight's glow, coating a jumble of forgotten junk. Cracked mirrors, a rocking chair missing an arm, boxes spilling yellowed papers. The thumping stopped the moment I crossed the threshold, replaced by a silence so thick it pressed against my ears. I swept the light around, half expecting to see a squatter or a raccoon staring back. Nothing, just shadows stretching too long across the slanted walls. Then I saw it. A wooden chest in the far corner, its lid ajar. It wasn't ornate, just a plain, weathered box, but something about it pulled me closer. My boots scuffed the floorboards, each step echoing louder than it should have. I knelt and lifted the lid fully, the hinges groaning like a dying animal. Inside was a leather journal, its pages brittle and stained, and beneath it, a tangle of rusted tools. A hammer, a chisel, and something that looked like a crude scalpel. My stomach twisted. Who leaves surgical tools in an attic? I opened the journal. The handwriting was spidery, frantic, dated 1897. The experiment must continue, the first line read. The walls listen. They hunger. I flipped through, my pulse quickening. It described someone, Dr. Elias Marrow, judging by the signature, obsessed with unlocking the attic's voice. He'd carved symbols into the beams, fed the walls offerings of blood and bone, believing it would awaken something ancient trapped within the house. The last entry was a scrawl. It speaks. It demands. I am not enough. I slammed the journal shut, my skin prickling. That's when I noticed the carvings. Faint, jagged lines etched into the wooden beams above me, spiraling like veins. They weren't random. They pulsed faintly, as if alive. I stumbled back, my flashlight flickering. The thumping started again, louder, faster, coming from all around me. The walls shuddered, dust raining down, and I swear I heard a voice, low, guttural, not human, muttering beneath the noise. I bolted for the stairs, but the door wouldn't budge. The latch was ice cold, stuck tight. Panic clawed at my chest as I pounded on it, yelling for no one to hear. The thumping grew deafening, synced with my heartbeat, and the air thickened, pressing me down. I turned, shining the light back into the attic. The chest was open wider now, though I hadn't touched it. The tools glinted, wet with something dark. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, before I noticed the rocking chair. It was moving slow, deliberate sways, though no one sat in it. The shadows around it twisted, stretching toward me like fingers. I backed against the door, my breath ragged, and that's when I felt it. A cold, wet touch on my neck. I spun around, nothing, but the sensation lingered, slithering down my spine. Desperate, I grabbed the hammer from the chest. If I couldn't get out, I'd break my way through. I swung at the door, would splintering with each hit, but the thumping only grew angrier. The walls groaned, a sound like breaking bones, and the carvings glowed faintly, a sickly yellow. I kept swinging, screaming, until the door gave way. I tumbled down the stairs, landing hard on the second floor, the hammer skittering away. I didn't stop to look back. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed my keys, and fled the house. The night air stung my lungs as I collapsed in my car, locking the doors. I glanced up at the attic window. A shadow stood there, tall, too tall, its edges blurring into the darkness. It didn't move, just watched me. And I felt that voice again, not in my ears but in my skull. You'll come back. I didn't sleep that night. I checked into a motel, showered off the attic's grime, and tried to convince myself it was a hallucination. Stress, exhaustion, anything rational. But the next morning, my phone buzzed with a photo I didn't remember taking. It was me, standing in the attic, staring at the chest. My eyes were wrong, empty, black pits. The timestamp, 3:17 a.m., hours after I'd left. I told myself I'd never go back. I hired movers to get my stuff, paid a contractor to board up the house. But the dreams started me climbing those stairs, the chest opening wider each time, the voice growing clearer. Finish it! Last week, I woke up with splinters under my nails and dirt on my shoes. My car's GPS showed a trip to Elm Street I don't recall making. Tonight, I'm writing this from the motel. The thumping's back, faint but growing, even though I'm miles away. I keep seeing that shadow in the corner of my eye, hear that wet touch brushing my skin. The journal's words burn in my mind. It demands. I don't know what it wants, but I feel it pulling me, a thread tugging at my bones. I'm scared to sleep. I'm scared to stay awake. And I'm terrified that tomorrow, I'll find myself back in that attic, hammer in hand, ready to give it what it's been waiting for.